Who governs and to what extent? There are four traditional answers to who governs. The Marxist view, those who control the economy also control the politics. The elitist view, the few top leaders make the key decisions. And the bureaucratic view is another one. Appointed civil servants run the government. There's another one called the pluralist view. Competition between interest groups shape the policies.
Start. Our government is the bureaucratic. We have a democratic republic. A democracy is when the many rule the government. So basically the people rule themselves. So there's two different types of democracies. The first one would be the direct, where the people vote directly for what they want. The second one is the representative, where the people vote for leaders who give them what they want, or at least try to give them what they want.
Political power in our nation is distributed to various authorities. An authority means the right to use power.
The framers of the Constitution wanted to create a government that is able to protect both liberty and order. The solution they chose was a constitution that combined the principles of popular consent, separation of powers, and federalism.
At first, after America declared independence from Great Britain, we had something called the Articles of Confederation. However, it was very weak, and it gave the government no power. So for a time, the colonies were in chaos, since the government couldn't really do anything to help them. There were things such as Shays' Rebellion with pitchforks and people revolting against the government. So one day we had a convention called the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, or the City of Brotherly Love, in which the framers together wrote a new constitution, which is the one we currently have. This constitution gave the government more power so it could actually do stuff. And this is when America could prosper.
The biggest challenge in the Constitutional Convention was balancing the small states and the bigger states. Eventually, they came up with two plans: the Virginia Plan, which was a proposal to create a strong national government, and the New Jersey Plan, which was a proposal to create a weaker national government. This was highly debated, and eventually they came together in the Great Compromise.
One of the biggest questions at the Constitutional Convention was how each state should be representative. There were people who supported the plan that a state's power and votes should be determined by how many people have. That in turn gave states like Virginia, who had a larger population, more power, while others believe that each state should have one vote, so then we could all be equally representative, since other states did have less people in them, such as Massachusetts. This eventually led to our legislative branch being broken up into two houses, or have a bicameral system. One would be the Senate, which every state would get two representatives, and so the voting potency was stronger. The other one would be based on population, and thus give the states with larger population more votes, and while the smaller states had less votes. This was a part of the Great Compromise, and it still functions today.
Authority was split between the national government and the federal government. There were enumerated powers, which is powers given to the national government alone, reserved powers, which are powers given to the state government alone, and concurrent powers, which is powers shared by both the national and the state governments.
Federal and national power was in the Constitution was split up into three main branches of government: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. They set up a system of check and balances so no one branch could become too powerful and become tyrannical. That way, everyone could be happy.
This chapter introduces the Constitution and explains exactly what the Constitution does. And although the Constitution was created centuries ago, it still is evolving and still runs our country through amendments, which are new provisions in the constitutions that have been ratified by the states.
Federalism gives states a way to actively help determine national policy and laws. States reserve some powers for public services, despite how the national government still reserves powers. Dual federalism is the belief that each different type of federalism, both federal and states governments, are supreme in their own spheres. However, changes in laws and court decisions now dictate federal power can override and overturn state decisions and laws if they don't adhere to the Constitution.
So there's three systems of governments. The first one is the unitary, in which the central government holds all the power. This is when power is centralized. The second one, which we have, is called the federal system, where the central government and the state government both affect the citizens. The powers divided between them. Both must agree to constitutional changes. The last one is the confederal system, in which the states have power. Central government is a creature of the constituent governments.
States and citizens have various ways to affect the policymaking and lawmaking in America.
So there's different ways that the state can directly affect the law. The first one is nullification. Nullification is when a state declares a law null and void if, in the state's opinion, it violates the Constitution. The second one is police power. Police power is when the states enact laws which promote health, safety, and morals. So there's three different ways that citizens can also affect the laws in the government. The first is initiative, which is when they can pass legislative measures directly on the ballot. The second one is referendum, which is enables voters to reject a measure passed by legislator. And the third one is recall, which voters can remove an elected official from office.
In recent times, states have become more dependent on federal financial assistance in order to run their programs. States must meet certain requirements if they wish to receive condition and aid grants and money. But there are also things that states must adhere called mandates, which are things that states must listen to federal government's order, whether or not they choose to accept mandates.
There are three different ways in which the federal government can aid the state government. The first one is grants and aid, in which money can be given directly to the state. The second one is categorical grants, which money is given to the states for a specific purpose, such as building an airport. The third one is revenue sharing, in which the government shares a fixed percent of its money to the state.
So, federalism is a way in which states and citizens can directly help shape American politics and policies. It's also a way for the government to still have power and also help find ways to assist the states. Chapter 3 introduces federalism. When people think of federalism, there are typically two types of diagrams you can use to describe it: a layer cake and a marble cake. In the layer cake federalism, there is clear separation of power and everything is explicitly said, while in marble cake, there is more of a blend on how power is shared.
The American government is supported by a political culture that fosters a sense of civic duty and citizens that take pride in the nation's constitutional arrangements. However, recently, there has been an increased mistrust of government officials.
Political culture is a coherent way about thinking how politics and government ought to be carried out. Civic duty is the belief that one has an obligation to participate in politics through things such as voting. civic competence, it's the belief that one person or that one can affect politics. As we stated earlier, trust in government has recently begun to fall.
In the American political culture, people value equal opportunities, but not always equal results. For example, in the American economic culture, people are much more tolerant of economic inequality, such as Bill Gates being super rich or anyone else being in the 1% while everyone else is poor.
One's political culture is shaped by their family, their environment, their economic class, and various other factors such as religion.
Although Americans value liberty and democracy, they are often preoccupied with their rights, which leads to an adversarial political lifestyle.
Chapter 5 begins discussion on civil liberty. Civil liberty are individual rights protected by the law from unjust government, and from it also prevents the government from becoming too powerful and controlling our lives too much.
People often think that civil liberties protect our freedoms, but that's only true up to a certain extent. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights actually have a list of competing rights. For example, there's a man named Carl Jacobs who made anti-Jewish speeches on the corners of Jewish neighborhoods. However, his neighbors were mad, right, and they called the cops. So he was eventually arrested for disturbing public order. This became a case of freedom of speech versus the preservation of public order. For many years after the Constitution was signed, the liberties were only applied to the federal government. However, after the Civil War, the rights started being applied to the states instead.
When it comes to civil liberties, there is often much debate, but one topic that garners a lot of debate is when you talk about civil liberties and religion.
The First Amendment has the Free Exercise Clause, which states that the law cannot prevent free exercise of religion. It also has the Establishment Clause, saying that the government cannot respect an establishment of religion. Furthermore, there is also the wall of separation between the government and the religion.
Even when you're arrested, you still have civil liberties. One example being the Miranda Rule, which officers must read you your rights before being arrested.
The Civil Rights Movement profoundly changed African American participation in politics, as well as other minority groups. This allowed these groups to become effective interest groups.
Civil rights is the right for people to be treated without unreasonable or unconstitutional difference, such as getting paid equally.
The 14th Amendment was both an opportunity and a problem. It states no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the U.S., nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Read broadly, it might mean that segregation would be illegal, but read narrowly, it could mean that segregation was legal.
Such as the separate but equal doctrine. The doctrine established in Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 stated that African Americans can be constitutionally kept in separate but equal facilities. This was eventually overturned in the Brown v. Board of Education, where it was declared that this was unconstitutional.
Throughout our history and in the future, the people will continue to find ways to protect their civil rights.
Another form of protest is called civil disobedience. It is when people choose to oppose a law, but peacefully, yet also choosing to accept the punishment that comes by it. Such as when someone tells you to do something, the government tells you to do something, or there's a law that prohibits something, and then you peacefully disobey it. You still accept the consequences of your punishment.
In the Declaration of Independence, it states that everyone should have equal opportunity for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. However, it is ironic that it doesn't specify race or gender. Throughout various civil rights movements in our history, things have changed. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proud?
100% accurate.